Chapter 116. 1. Nina didn't know what to say and could only blink speechlessly. The same went for Gerhard. He unconsciously ran his hand down his much-reduced belly as he gazed at his son, who he had been reunited with after a few months of absence. Yet, despite their reunion, Gerhard couldn't allow himself to burst into tears of happiness. Eugene was now an adult and Gerhard was well aware that his son could no longer be treated as a child. Gerhard hesitantly said, "To think I would live to see the day where you would actually take elves as your servants." Nina didn't say anything, but she felt the same way as Gerhard. She had never thought that, in all her life, the day would come when she would have to train a couple of elves. "Do they really intend to serve as servants of the annex?" Nina asked doubtfully. "They don't want to work for the main house," Eugene explained. "There were already enough servants for all of the annex's needs. In the first place, the only ones living here were Eugene and Gerhard. And even then, Eugene was away from the main estate most of the time, so Gerhard was in fact usually living in the annex all on his own. While there were a lot of things that Nina could teach them, she had to wonder just when exactly they would get a chance to put those things into practice, but it couldn't be helped. Since Eugene had already said that he would accept them as his servants, Nina felt that she shouldn't put up any resistance. Eugene awkwardly began, Well, I know it's a bit tactless for me to say this right after returning from a few months away from home, but you're planning on going somewhere else again?" Gerhard asked with an indignant snort. "There's a really important matter that I need to deal with," Eugene explained. "I need to head back to Aroth for a while. Still, at least this time you're letting us know in advance." "Father, are you really still annoyed by that?" "Who's annoyed, you brat? You're just darting around wherever you please, so what's there for me to get annoyed about?" Gerhard responded sarcastically. It was a pity that Eugene had left right after returning from the Black Lion Castle, without even sparing a single word for Gerhard, but to think that he had actually sneaked off to Samar, which was rumored to be very dangerous. Eugene tried to soothe his father. "It's not like I'm going somewhere dangerous this time, and I don't want to lie to you either. It probably won't take too long before I'm done and on my way back." "Ahem." Gerhard prompted him with a cough. "And after I've returned, I'll stay here quietly for a while without leaving to go somewhere else," Eugene promised. Gerhard eventually relented. "There's no need to go that far. It's just that as your birth father, I still have to show some concern for my only son. What parent in this world would feel glad to hear of their children becoming involved in such dangerous affairs?" "I'm sure there would be a few," Eugene argued. Gerhard snorted. Well, that might be, but I'm not that sort of person." "Eugene, do you really think that your father is someone who would enjoy hearing about his child facing dangers and misfortunes?" Of course not," Eugene responded immediately. "As your son, I know better than anyone how much my father cares about me and wants to show me his love." At these words, Gerhard's lips twitched in a suppressed smile. Eugene continued, "Because of that, I promise that I'll also be more careful, so that you don't have to feel so worried or sad, father." "I'm grateful for those words, but don't let yourself feel too restrained out of a needless consideration for me," Gerhard said as he fully relaxed his stern expression and patted Eugene on the shoulders. "After all, you've already held your coming-of-age ceremony at the Black Lion Castle. You're no longer a child. Instead, you're an adult who needs to take responsibility for his own actions and decide what he wants to do." After this remark, a rather lengthy lecture followed. Eugene didn't feel any need to interrupt Gerhard while he was nagging, instead answering all of his questions with full sentences while listening closely until the very end. "I didn't think that you would really keep listening to him patiently all the way until the end," Christina said afterward as she followed Eugene out, feeling quite surprised that Eugene had such a side to him. "What did you think I would do instead of listening patiently? Do you think that I would just snap at him to shut up?" Eugene asked sarcastically. "Although I didn't think you'd go that far, I expected you to try and use a more polite choice of words to cut the conversation short," Christina replied. "It seems like you really do think that I'm some kind of mannerless bastard," Eugene commented. Christina denied this. "Not at all. It's just that from what I've seen of you so far, Sir Eugene doesn't seem like the type of person to humbly listen to such pretentious nagging. It seems like you've seen right through me." "You're right. I hate pretension and I also hate it when people nag me while trying to tell me what to do, but it also depends on who's doing the nagging," Eugene grumbled with a shrug. After all, my own birth father is just saying these words to me because he's worried about me, his only son. Christina asked, if that's the case, then shouldn't you have told him about going on such a dangerous journey at the very start? Eugene retorted, so what if I had told him? Once he knew my reason for going, would he be any less worried? There's no way that'd be the case. My father. Well, he's a very empathetic person. When I was young, there were a lot of times he burst into tears. Knock knock. Sienna's playful words suddenly echoed inside of his head. That's right. Eugene had thought that it was strange. In his previous life as Hamel, he hadn't shed tears for most of his life. Even when it had become painful enough that he would rather die, right before the end of his life, he had refused to cry. I was wondering why this body of mine was so prone to crying. As expected, blood really did tell. Eugene belatedly blamed Gerhard's genes for the fact that he had burst into tears several times since he had been reincarnated. In any case, since I know that it's all for my sake as his son, I should at least pretend to listen to my father. I might not be able to live while following his advice, but when he gives it, I should at least say yes while pretending to listen, Eugene concluded. Absent-mindedly, Christina replied, is that so? Eugene didn't think that he had said something unusual. According to Eugene's own common sense, he felt that this was quite a natural tendency. In fact, where in the world would you find a son who faithfully followed all of his parents' advice? Even so, it was only right to show some kind of positive affirmation of their parents' care. However, Christina's reaction was a little alarming. She was just staring at Eugene, her lips pressed tight with a slightly stiff expression. Did I say something strange? Eugene tentatively asked. No, not at all, Christina replied. But your expression makes me feel like you might be thinking that, Eugene argued. As you may already know, I was abandoned by my birth parents when I was still an infant. After that, I grew up in a monastery until I was 10, when I was adopted by Cardinal Rogerus and raised as his foster daughter. As a result, I have never experienced the relationship between a birth parent and their child, Christina revealed. Although Eugene felt that he hadn't said anything that absolutely needed to be experienced to truly be understood, he decided not to say this out loud. There were certain circumstances that no one really enjoyed talking about to others. I feel like the relationship between you and me isn't deep enough yet for me to be willing to share such a story. Christina had drawn a clear line between them as she said this with a twisted smile. Eugene had no desire to intentionally cross this line. Christina changed the subject. When do you plan on leaving for Arath? Right now, Eugene answered. Then why have we come back to your room? Christina asked, puzzled. Because I need to talk to you, Eugene said as he plopped down on a sofa. It had been a few months since he last returned to this room. Before that, he had been away from this room for several years. Even so, it didn't feel unfamiliar to him. I'm going to Arath alone, Eugene declared. Christina just stared at Eugene without saying anything in reply. Eugene didn't avoid this gaze and just pointed at the sofa across from him. Eventually, Christina said, I should have already told you this before, Sir Eugene. As the Saint of Light, I must accompany the hero. Someone leaked the information about you and me, interrupted Eugene. It can't have been the Pope or Cardinal Rogerus, Christina insisted. Haven't I already said that to you before? Those two wouldn't want me to die for something like tea. Once again, Eugene spoke over her. They could have changed their minds. Or it could have been someone else connected to them who spilled the information. That could be the case, but I can't help but be offended that you still insist on suspecting the Holy Empire. The information might also have leaked from the Lionheart clan. Christina relayed her suspicions. That's right, Eugene agreed. I'm also keeping an eye out for that. That's why, for the time being, I need to monitor the situation. If it's the Lionheart clan, then the head of the council might try to play his hand once more because he just can't tolerate my existence. Then when his move fails, I can take action. Christina silently processed this. The Holy Empire might really be innocent in all this, in which case I don't want you to get involved in this, Eugene explained. Christina silently stared at Eugene. She then rubbed her stiff cheeks with her hands and took a few deep breaths. With her usual smile back on her face, Christina spoke up. Sir Eugene. What? Eugene asked. Christina accused. Could it be that you're suspicious of me? I'm not, Eugene gave his honest response. Barong wanted to kill both of us, you and me alike. Though, well, he might have just been saying that and perhaps he only wanted to kill me. Christina stayed silent as Eugene continued. However, is there any need for me to suspect you? What reason would you have for fucking with me like this? Well, you might have your reasons, but would you really use such a cumbersome method to do so? Eugene pointed out. You accompanied me to the Elven domain and you also saw Lady Sienna while we were there. Before that, you were traveling with me all that time. And when I was bedridden for a few days, you even nursed me. So that's why you're not suspicious of me? Christina eventually asked. What, do you want me to suspect you? Do you really not trust me when I say that I trust you? Eugene asked sarcastically. Not at all, Christina said with a smile as she shook her head. It surprises me. You really do get surprised by the strangest things, Eugene scoffed. In any case, I'm going to Arath alone. Even if you stubbornly insist on following me, I won't let you come with me. Then what should I do? Is it really all right for me to just stay here and wait for you to return, Sir Eugene? Christina asked reluctantly. Nope, Eugene said as he leaned forward to peer closely at Christina. I'm not familiar with the circumstances of the Holy Empire. It's also difficult for me to dig into such matters. However, you should find it easier than I would. Christina let out a small laugh as she shook her head. Indeed, it seems like Sir Eugene really does trust me. Christina wasn't foolish enough to take what she heard for granted. She understood that Eugene was drawing a line in the sand. Without her crossing that line to meet him, it would be impossible for them to gain complete trust in each other. In the end, he was asking her to choose carefully. Would she remain a saint whose loyalty belonged to the Holy Empire? Or would she follow her God's revelation and truly accompany the hero? It might be difficult for me to achieve a result that matches Sir Eugene's expectations, Christina warned. I don't expect much, Eugene reassured her. If that's the case, then I'll do my best to meet your low expectations, Christina said. Then she pulled over a pen and some paper that had been set aside on a nearby table. Once she was done writing, Eugene read the paper he was handed and asked, Rohanna Celis? Who's this? She's a friend that I made while I was still living in the monastery, Christina explained. Eugene double-checked the name that was written on the paper and the address given below it. Christina continued, In the end, I was carried off by Cardinal Rogerus while Rohanna remained in the monastery. Even after that, we continued to exchange letters, and we've also met up a few times since then to spend some time together. So you're saying that we can trust her? Eugene confirmed. Yes. I'll contact you through her, and I will try to send you a letter at least once a month. What if a letter doesn't reach me within a month? That will never happen, Christina replied with a smirk. Back in Arath, the scenery of this magic kingdom felt more familiar and welcoming to Eugene than Jadal, the town where he had been born and raised. Well, it makes sense. Ever since I was adopted into the main family, I've never once returned to Jadal. Within the grand frame of the Kiel Empire, Eugene's birthplace, Jadal, was pretty much as deep in the countryside as one could go. It had fields, mountains, rice paddies, and not much else. There was a town there, but frankly speaking, it was a backward town that could barely be compared to the shabby trade cities found in Samar. Just like when Eugene had first come to Pentagon 3 years ago, one of the guides came up to him. Are you a tourist? Welcome to Pentagon, the capital of Aero. As he was speaking, the guide suddenly trailed off, his eyes widening into circles. He recognized Eugene by his gray hair and the furry cloak that was wrapped around his body. There was no reason why he wouldn't be able to recognize him either. Eugene had only left Arath a few months back. The guide gaped as he thought, it's Eugene Lionheart. If you wanted to work as a guide in Arath, you needed to know all the stories going around the city, especially whimsical stories that were sure to delight the ears of the tourists. The stories spread about Eugene were of such weight that it seemed like they would never fall into the trivial category. Eugene was the descendant of a great hero. His adoption into the main family was an unprecedented event for the prestigious Lionheart clan. Even though he wasn't a direct heir, his skills were such that no one could question his right to compete for the seat of the next patriarch. From the age of 13, Eugene had managed to outshine the children of the direct line with his talent for martial arts. Even worse, it wasn't just martial arts, he was a genius born with the talent for magic as well. Eugene was reputed to be a child of destiny, someone who had become the youngest wizard ever to obtain an entry pass into the Royal Library, Akron. He had even become the disciple of the Red Tower Master, Lovelian Safis. According to the rumors, by the time Eugene was 19 years old, He had already reached the fifth circle. All this alone was enough of a story to get the tourists hooked. By sprinkling a little seasoning on top and telling them about the riots on Bolero Street as well, the tourists would be happy to open their wallets and give the guides a tip. Sir Eugene, please allow me the honor of escorting you. The shocked guides all ran over. Of course, they didn't want just the honor of escorting the famous Eugene. The guides there were hoping that, after being hired by Eugene, they would get a unique story for themselves that they could use to entertain the tourists. After all, hasn't the guide who stuck to Eugene Lionheart when he first arrived at Pentagon recently bought a building in the capital? His success story had managed to fire up the hopes of all the guides. What's with these bastards? Eugene thought to himself. He had been hoping that they would know their place and keep their distance. The fact that they were instead running at him with their eyes rolling crazily was just a headache. Startled, Eugene leapt up off the ground and flew into the air. Sir Eugene, please take my carriage. I'll make sure to escort you to your destination in comfort. Even the coachmen of the aerial carriages were squawking their pitches at him. One of the station attendants called out to him, Sir Eugene, it's forbidden to use flying magic in the skies above Pentagon without permission. You must make use of the aerial carriages and the floating stations. Eugene was already well aware of this fact. Since there were far too many wizards in this magic kingdom, if all of these wizards used such magic to satisfy their own convenience, the city's order would soon become a mess. Therefore, flying magic and personal spatial transportation spells such as blink were forbidden in Pentagon. Only the highest rank of wizards in Aroth, including the Tower Masters, were allowed to use such conveniences. Well, I guess I'll just pay the fine, Eugene muttered to himself. Eugene didn't really think much of the penalty. Even if he was forced to pay a huge fine, Eugene had a lot of money to spare. But it wasn't likely that he would be even charged a fine. Eugene's current master was the Red Tower Master Loveline. Apart from that, he was also on close terms with several of Arotha's high-ranking wizards. Or if I don't want to pay any penalties, I could just ask the Crown Prince Honian for a favor. No, on second thought, it would be a bit disgraceful to make such a request of the Crown Prince. What if I used the name of the commander of the court wizards as an excuse instead? In fact, it was actually rather funny to be caught up on such trivial thoughts. Because the task that Eugene was currently heading over to do would be such a huge event, that flying over the capital city couldn't even be compared to it. Eugene hadn't even contacted Lovelian in advance to tell him that he was returning to Aroth. He felt a bit guilty for not doing so. However, it couldn't be helped. For Eugene, he couldn't help but wonder if Lovelian would really give him permission and support him in what he intended to do, or if perhaps as the Red Tower Master who was bound to Aroth, Lovelian might instead decide to prevent Eugene's actions. Although I feel like he probably would give his permission, Eugene thought hopefully. Lovelian was sincere in treating Sienna as his grandmaster. But if I needlessly ask him for permission, I might get Lovelian in trouble later on, Eugene persuaded himself. Thus he decided to just try and make his attempt first. Eugene came to a stop in midair and looked down below. In the distance he could see Arotha's royal castle, Abram, floating on the lake. Right below the castle was the royal library, Akron. Eugene grinned and flew down. One of Arotha's treasures, a certain magic staff, was kept in Akron. Created using a whole dragon heart, this magic staff had been used by Sienna herself. Eugene was here for Chapter 117, Act 2. There were a lot of familiars in Akron, but it was impossible for most of these familiars to even hold a proper conversation. They supervised their assigned tasks as they had been programmed to do, and were only capable of obeying the simple orders given by the wizards who visited their halls. However, Mare was different. Even though she was a familiar created by using magic, she was so sophisticated that one could even believe that she was a real human being. Mare herself held a great amount of pride in this fact. Therefore, Mare didn't like to spend her free time doing the same things as other familiars did. Although her body didn't really need to eat or drink, she wanted to eat and drink like a real person. She wanted to be able to feel and express her emotions through casual conversations with others. This royal library, Akron, was just like a boring prison to Mare. She was absolutely forbidden from going outside the doors of Akron, so she had spent her past few hundreds of years in a listless state. When even she couldn't take it any longer, she would shut off her link to witchcraft. Just like turning off the power to a device, it would shut down her consciousness. As a familiar, Mare couldn't sleep, nor did she feel the need to sleep, but this suspension of consciousness was somewhat similar to sleep. But it was only similar, it wasn't really sleeping. She couldn't even dream. In the end, this meant that there was no way for Mare to relieve her boredom. It's so boring, Mare thought to herself as she slumped on top of a desk, pouting. Although she had already realized how boring this place was more than 100 years ago, the last few months had been particularly boring and tortuous for Mare. It's all because of Sir Eugene, Mare complained. She was thinking about Eugene Lionheart. He had only visited Sienna's hall for 2 years. Compared to the length of time that Mare had existed, this was an absurdly short period of time. However, that short amount of time had been so much fun that it had reminded Mare of the time that she had spent with Sienna, her creator, a long time ago. Even though there had been several other wizards who had visited Sienna's hall before Eugene, Mare had never once found it enjoyable to talk to those old wizards who were old-fashioned and whose sense of humor had decayed as they aged. Most of the wizards who visited this place were idiots who had spent most of their lives listening to the sound of people calling them geniuses, and they had thus fallen into the delusion that they really were geniuses. In other words, they were engrossed in their own arrogance and self-love. Such wizards held no respect for a familiar like Mare. This was an unavoidable issue. Most wizards treated their familiars as slaves that took care of cumbersome chores for them. Although it was forbidden by the laws of the continent to use humans or demi-humans as slaves, there was no problem with wizards using their familiars as slaves. But Eugene was different. He didn't mind talking with Mare and had never disrespected Mare just because she was a familiar. Meanwhile, he had also been absorbed in learning. Most of these condescending types of wizards weren't able to understand witchcraft, and in their despair, they would quickly leave Sienna's hall as if they were fleeing. However, Eugene had made his way to Sienna's hall every day for 2 whole years in order to understand witchcraft, and had managed to learn it through his hard work and perseverance. "I'm so bored I could just die," Mare groaned as she kept pouting her lips and tapping on the desk. There are not even any other wizards visiting. It had only been a few months since Eugene had left, but Mare couldn't believe this fact. Although time didn't really touch her, it still felt like at least a year had passed, so had it really been only a few months? No, a few months is still quite a long time for humans. If that much time has passed, shouldn't he at least come and visit just once, even if it's out of boredom? Zap. Her tired mind was awakened by a sudden alarm. Mare raised her head and blinked in surprise for a few moments. Soon, a bright smile spread across her lips. She picked up the large hat that she had placed beside her and got up from her seat. After roughly straightening her frizzy hair with her hands, Mare plunked the hat down on top of her curls, but she didn't like the look of her reflection in the window. Taking her hat back off, she quickly ran both hands through her hair. She didn't want to look too neat. She didn't even want to look as if she'd been waiting to greet him when he got up. What she wanted was a natural look. To look like she usually did. Focused eagerly on his arrival, Mare quickly trotted over to stand in front of the elevator. "What should I say?" Mare wondered. "Why have you come back? Just as I thought, you've realized it, haven't you? Sir Eugene, your magic thesis was quite impressive, but it wasn't perfect." "Yep, but that's only natural. After all, hasn't it only been 2 years since you've started learning magic? That's why I told you, didn't I, Sir Eugene? That you shouldn't be in such a hurry to leave? Magic should be practiced with a calm mind." Well, the fact that you never even lend half an ear to other people's advice was also mentioned several times in the fairy tale. If you really lived your past life like that, then you should change things now that you've been reincarnated. That's way too long. The elevator was on its way up. It would arrive in a few seconds from now. Mare straightened her back and puffed out her chest, then she placed both hands on her waist. "Welcome to Sienna's hall," Mare said with a wide smile, just like when they first met. Right after she had gotten the words out, Mare felt the need to wince. Her voice had come out higher than she had expected. And it wasn't just her voice, it felt like her smile was also a bit too wide. Mare immediately straightened her expression and took a few steps back. Pretending to be surprised, Mare continued, "Oh my. Isn't it Sir Eugene? You just left Aroth a few months ago. What are you doing back so soon?" Once again, Mare felt regret as soon as these words were out. She was linked to Akron's management systems. This meant that she was able to tell in real time when any wizard presented their entrance pass and entered Akron. And Eugene was probably also aware of this fact. The moment that Eugene looked down at her and was about to say something, Mare burst out. "Akron's management systems have been down for maintenance since this morning. As you may know, Sir Eugene, spells can be very delicate and to be checked periodically. Especially here in Akron, since there are a lot of treasures that have drawn plenty of interest and might even tempt other countries, let alone individual wizards, to try running off with them. Oh, is that so? Eugene reacted mildly. Yes, that's right. Although the spells cast by Lady Sienna are so perfect that they don't need to be overhauled even after 100 years have passed, Akron's management system was not created by Lady Sienna. Really now it's quite difficult for us, you know? Thankfully there aren't that many wizards visiting. A perfect save, Mare thought as she grinned cheekily. So anyway, Sir Eugene, may I ask why you've come here? Did you realize that you still need to do some more study after all? Mare teased. Eugene hummed as he calmly looked down at Mare's upturned face. She looked like Sienna had in her childhood. Unlike the ones in the portraits, this smile was full of playfulness. Eugene smirked and placed his hand on top of Mare's head. Wow, you really do cross the line so casually as soon as we meet, Mare complained. She really should shake his hand off, or at least that's what she told herself, but Mare didn't try to remove his hand immediately. Instead, she just grinned as she looked up at Eugene. Have you been well? Eugene asked. Me snorted in disgust. Why even ask if I've been well or not? It's the same as always. That just sounds like you're not doing well to me, Eugene responded. Not at all, Mare insisted. I would never say something like that. I'm just saying that things are the same as usual, without anyone coming to visit me in the midst of this quiet tranquility. Well, I can get in a bit of contemplation, do some cleaning, and reorder the magic books displayed on the bookshelves. Mare tried hard not to complain too much. As she continued speaking in a monotonous tone, Mare took hold of Eugene's wrist, his hand still resting on her head. After composing herself, Mare coughed. Ahem. Well, for now we shouldn't just stay standing here blocking the entrance. Aren't you already familiar with everything here? Needless to say, the place where you always sit is still in the same state. Of course, there's also the cushion that you left there. I don't think that I'll need to sit in my usual place. Although Eugene had smiled as he said these words, Mare wasn't smiling. Her eyes widened into circles as she stared at Eugene. Why not? Mare pleaded as her face crumpled into a frown. No way. Did you really come all the way here just to say hello? Didn't you come here because you wanted to continue practicing your magic? Well, for things like magic training, I don't really need to come here to do that, now do I? Eugene said teasingly. How arrogant! Mare shouted in a sharp tone as she pinched Eugene's wrist. I won't tolerate such a remark from you, Sir Eugene. Are you really saying that you just want to practice your magic elsewhere instead of here? Do you know how many wizards have made it their lifelong wish to one day make it into Akron? Truthfully speaking, that has nothing to do with me, Eugene pointed out. Well, that might be true, but in any case, no matter how talented you might be, it would be overwhelmingly more efficient to practice in Akron than to practice alone, Mare fervently argued. Well, I guess that could be true, Eugene shrugged. You're really annoying, Mare growled out with shaking shoulders as she twisted her pinching fingers. Yes, I know that you are talented, Sir Eugene. But so what? Why did you even come here? Just to say hi? I refuse to accept your greetings. There's no reason for it. If I had to say something, it's just because. What? What are you doing? Why are you heading inside? While Mare was in the middle of her tirade, Eugene began walking into the hall without shaking off Mare's hand, which was still pinching his wrist. While rattling out her questions, Mare followed behind Eugene. Didn't you say that you didn't need to sit in your usual spot? So why are you heading inside? See, in the end you really are going to take a seat. So why act like you weren't? Not like I was angry about that or anything. I won't be sitting down, Eugene repeated. Then why are you? Mare suddenly stopped speaking. Her brows furrowed and she released Eugene's hand before eventually saying, Tremple Vizardo is here. What? Eugene responded. Have you already forgotten him? Mare reminded Eugene. He's the commander of Aratha's court wizards. An old guy who goes around sporting a handlebar mustache that doesn't really suit him. No, I know who he is, but how do you know that he's here? Eugene clarified. How do I know? What in the world are you talking about? Mare yelped in surprise before quickly straightening her expression. It looks like the overhaul of the management systems has been completed. What great timing, Eugene commented. The world is just full of coincidences like that. What? It looks like Tremple Vizardo is on his way up to this hall. Could it be because of you, Sir Eugene? Mare speculated. That's probably the case, Eugene said with a smirk. They had gotten here faster than he had expected. Well, he should have figured they'd be early since he had flown in a no-fly zone. The guards were primarily responsible for managing the capital's security, but in the end, the highest levels of the guard reported to the Court Wizards Division. Lord Eugene. The cry was issued as soon as the elevator doors opened. Tremple walked out of the doors with his arms held wide open. If you were coming to Aroth, it would have been nice if you had contacted us in advance. Truthfully speaking, Tremple was a bit annoyed, both by the fact that Eugene had broken the law by flying in the sky above the capital city and by the fact that he, the commander of the Court Wizards Division, had to personally take action for such a trivial issue. However, it couldn't be helped. If the offending party had been just a common wizard, then he could have just been dealt with according to the law. But he wasn't a common wizard, now was he? Tremple had a lot of interest in Eugene and hoped to somehow persuade him to join the Court Wizards. As for Eugene flying without permission, something like that could be given a bit of leeway. If Eugene requested it, Tremple was even thinking of granting him the right to fly freely through Arotha's skies. Aren't you here to punish me? Eugene asked. What should I say? Flying in the sky over the capital, well, it might be an issue if the average wizard were to do it, but it's fine if it's you, Lord Eugene, Tremple said obsequiously. If that's the case, then it's my luck. Eugene casually accepted the absolution. Please don't worry about it too much. Well, Lord Eugene is still young, aren't you? It looks like you just couldn't resist acting your age, Flying where forbidden is a light offense, so it can easily be overlooked. So, does that mean Lord Eugene is now a rule floater? 1? Tremple laughed heartily as he delivered his pun. Unable to hold it in, Mare revealed a disgusted expression. Eugene's body shivered in disgust as he turned his head to look Tremple in the face. His handlebar mustache really didn't suit him. Although he was surely older than he appeared, Tremple had the face of a man in his middle age with the wrinkles to match. Are you crazy? Eugene recalled when he had made a similar joke. The words that Seal had spat out back then as her face twisted into a scowl echoed inside of his head. That's right, so this is how Seal must have felt back then. Eugene now felt regret for uttering such words at that time. Yeah, I guess so. Eugene still tried to respond politely as he turned his head back around. Tremple was also displeased by such a dry reaction from Eugene. He was the commander of the Court Wizards. His position was the highest that a battle wizard could reach in Aroth. In some ways, this meant that he had even higher authority than a tower master. Such a person had personally come to visit Eugene and even made a joke as a sign of friendship, but instead. Even though I can get the Court Wizards to laugh so hard that they have to clutch their stomachs just by opening my mouth, Tremple complained internally. Ahem. By the way, Lord Eugene, may I ask why you have come to Akron? I've come here on an errand, Eugene replied. What do you mean, an errand? It's rather famously known that you were obsessed with witchcraft while you were studying in Aroth, Lord Eugene. As expected, Lord Eugene, you truly are a wizard at heart. Being reminded of such a great spell every time you close your eyes, you couldn't stand to be away any longer, could you? Tremple said with an understanding smile as he walked over to Eugene. If that's the case, how about you just live in Aroth permanently? I've also heard the news about you, Lord Eugene. They say that you returned from Samar leading over 100 elves with you? While I've heard that the forest at the Lionheart clan's main estate is quite spacious and beautiful, strictly speaking, it doesn't really belong to you now, does it, Lord Eugene? Yes, well. Eugene tried to stay non-committal. You also happen to be an adult now, so, until when do you plan on staying at the main estate where so many eyes will be on you? Lord Eugene, if you so desire, I can find a luxurious mansion for you in the capital. As for the elves you picked from the forest, there's a forest belonging to the royal palace that they can live in. What exactly are you doing? Tremple asked, his eyes widening as he stared at Eugene. Eugene had circled around witchcraft, which was in the center of the hall, and was now standing in front of Akasha, which was hung on the wall. Tremple realized something and burst into laughter. So that was the case. Lord Eugene, you don't have your own staff yet, right? I remember when I first visited Sienna's hall in Akron. That was the first time I had seen such an amazing and beautiful staff. Just like you, I was fascinated. The wand that I had been using was no longer pleasing to the eye, so I really went to a lot of trouble to get a staff made from a fairy tree's wood. At his age, Eugene still had a cute side to him. Tremple walked over to Eugene with an amused smile. It's extremely difficult to obtain, and even when it's available, there's no guarantee that you'll be able to obtain it. But if Lord Eugene were to join the court wizards, Tremple trailed off suggestively. Without giving any reply, Eugene stretched a hand out towards Akasha. Tremple didn't feel any need to stop him from doing so. In this hall, there were no rules forbidding guests from holding Akasha directly. This was because there was no point in doing so. Akasha did not recognize anyone other than the wise Sienna as its master. Sir Eugene. Unlike Tremple, Mare was standing right next to Eugene. She felt like there was something different going on from the smile that was on Eugene's face. What are you doing right now? What do you think? You can tell just by looking. Eugene snickered as he continued to reach out to Akasha. Just like last time, I want to try holding it. Hold on, Mare said, her face turning white. Eugene's mana was moving. It wasn't just a simple infusion of mana either. His mana was moving as if it was performing some kind of technique. What this meant was clear. Eugene was trying to use some kind of magic. Tremple's smile instantly disappeared. It was forbidden to use magic in Akron. This was a strong taboo that couldn't be compared to the one banning flying over the capital city. The tomes that were being kept in Akron were the greatest spells in Arath. No, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were the greatest spells in the history of magic. Therefore, they needed to be carefully protected. As such, no one could be allowed to use magic in Akron. Whether it was the commander of the court wizards, a tower master, or even Aratha's royal family. Lord Eugene. Tremple let out a roar. This taboo was currently being violated right in front of his eyes. Mare quickly reached out her hand and grabbed Eugene's collar. What do you think you're doing? Mare demanded. You should be well aware, Sir Eugene. Using magic in Akron is. I know, Eugene said with a nod as he pulled Akasha closer. However, without using magic, I won't be able to take this with me, so what else can I do? Mare couldn't say anything in response to these words. Fwoosh. The dragon heart embedded into the tip of Akash burst into light. Chapter 118, 3. The mana which had been fluctuating around Eugene, concentrated onto Akasha. The mana that hadn't yet been visualized blended with the light being emitted from the dragon heart, giving the light multiple hues. This beautiful and radiant light engulfed Eugene. Tremple and Mare stared at the scene in front of them with awe. They both knew what was about to happen. Asha, the staff that no one had been able to control ever since the wise Sienna had left, was about to accept a new owner. Utterly ridiculous. Tremple gasped, unable to believe it. It had been 200 years since Akasha was first stored in Akron. During that long period of time, the various wizards who had been granted entry into Akron had made many attempts to be recognized as Akasha's new master. Even Tremple himself had made an attempt. That was why he couldn't believe what he was currently seeing. Akasha had never been seen to accept any type of mana. The fact that it wouldn't accept an infusion of mana meant that it couldn't be used to cast any magic. It was a magic staff that couldn't be used for magic. If you really wanted to, you could still use it as a club, but what would be the point of that? The light began to fade. Ignoring the surprised reactions coming from his surroundings, Eugene focused all of his attention onto Akasha. Whoa, Eugene first exclaimed in admiration, honestly revealing his true emotions. He then gently touched his own throbbing head with his fingers as he wondered, is this one of Akasha's functions? Although Eugene himself didn't really know if this was an accurate impression of what had just happened to him, it felt like a huge amount of information had been implanted into his brain. The implanted information had then combined with his already existing knowledge, as if it had been there from the very beginning. My understanding of magic itself is completely transformed, Eugene marveled. There were several types of spells that Eugene could use. When his white flame formula had reached the level of the 5th star, Eugene had immediately become able to cast spells up to the 5th circle without using any incantations. This was the ability of the ring flame formula that Eugene had created by combining the white flame formula with the eternal whole. The parts from the eternal whole were what enabled him to record a spell formula in his subconscious, without the use of a scroll. While staying at the Red Tower of Magic, Eugene had learned the basics of magic. Then he had continued to learn magic from each of Akron's halls. Among the things he had learned, Most of the magic he had absorbed were the spells he had learned from Sienna's hall. After Eugene had completed his ring flame formula, with Lovelian's help he had been able to adapt existing circle magic spells to better suit his ring flame formula and had relearned them. How strange, Eugene thought as he narrowed his eyes at Akasha. There was no way that Akasha could have been aware that he had developed the ring flame formula. If one took into account their fundamental principles alone, the ring flame formula did seem similar to the eternal whole. That being said, they weren't exactly the same. In the end, circles and cores were two completely different types of mana organs after all. It feels like it's somehow combining with my own thoughts and providing its assistance, Eugene tentatively observed. Even though it couldn't have known about the ring flame formula, Akasha was transforming the various spells that Eugene had tucked away inside his head, adapting them to be easier to use with the ring flame formula. It seems to have based its adaptations on the spells that Lovelian had already adapted for Eugene. In other words, Akasha automatically analyzed Eugene's magic and spell formulas, then transformed all existing spell formulas into the most optimal forms that were suitable for Eugene. Eugene hummed thoughtfully as he scratched his temple, then took a step forward and approached a nearby bookshelf. Mare followed after Eugene with a blank expression on her face, but Tremple found himself unable to move from the spot. This was because Tremple was wondering what in the world he was supposed to do in response to this. Akasha was one of Aratha's treasures, but a new owner had appeared for that Akasha, so this meant that Akasha could no longer be kept in Akron. Lord Eugene? Tremple finally spoke up. Yes, Eugene replied to his call as he pulled out a magic book from a nearby bookshelf. What in the world just happened? Did Akasha really? Tremple trailed off in disbelief. Eugene calmly declared, as you can see, I have become its new owner. Tremple could only respond with a stunned, how? I'm afraid that the problem won't be solved just by convincing you, Sir Tremple, now will it? Eugene pointed out as he walked over to a nearby desk. Then he tried to pull out a chair and take a seat, but Mare quickly stepped in front of Eugene to block him. Even though Mare still had a lost look on her face, she shook her head resolutely. Then she kicked Eugene's shin with her own small foot. All right, Eugene coaxed her with a smile as he pushed the chair back in. He then walked over to a window on the right-hand side of the hall. This was where the seat that Eugene had always used when visiting Sienna's hall stood. There were several reasons why he had habitually used this same seat. It was close to both the elevators and witchcraft. He could check the passage of time by looking at the view from the window. And Sienna's portrait, which was hanging on the wall behind witchcraft, was also visible from here. That last one wasn't Eugene's motivation for choosing this seat. It was actually the reason why Mare had decided at some point to start sitting across from Eugene. While Eugene was focused on studying magical texts, Mare would either look outside the window or stare at Sienna's portrait. Mare sniffed with a triumphant smile as Eugene sat in his usual seat. Does that mean you don't feel that there's any need to convince me? Tremple asked, his brows furrowing as he finally walked over to Eugene. There was a tone to this question that warned that the words Eugene had just said could be taken as a huge insult depending on how Tremple chose to accept them. I greatly respect Sir Tremple as a wizard, so how could I have meant such an insult by those words? Eugene asked as he opened up the magic text. Sir Tremple, I'm also well aware of the consequences of what I just did. I know how difficult things will get for me if I am unable to convince everyone of my right to do so. It seems that you're well aware of your situation, Lord Eugene. I'd be well within my rights to take you in for questioning, even if you're unwilling to cooperate, Tremple threatened. Take me in for questioning? Are you really going to arrest me for the crime of flying over the capital? Eugene asked with feigned surprise. Tremple scoffed. At this point, something like that can't even be considered to be an issue. But doing whatever you want with Akasha is. But Akasha doesn't really belong to Arath, now does it? Eugene interrupted him with a smile. Although it is currently being stored in Akron, Akasha's true owner is the wise Sienna. Tremple could only silently acknowledge this. I have inherited the ownership of Akasha from the wise Sienna, Eugene revealed. What? Tremple burst out, his eyes shooting wide open. Tremple opened his mouth to ask further questions, but unable to find the words, he could only close his mouth once more. It was just as Eugene had said. The true owner of Akasha was the wise Sienna. No, it wasn't just Akasha. Everything that was stored in this hall ultimately belonged to Sienna. If I need to convince everyone of this issue, then perhaps a hearing should be held for it. I will be staying in Arath for a while, so if a hearing is organized I'll be sure to attend it in order to give a full explanation. You aren't going to run away after saying that, are you? Tremple spat out as he glared at Eugene. At these words, Eugene just shrugged and said with a smile, I am a member of the Lionheart clan's direct line and a disciple of the wise Sienna. What is there for me to be afraid of, and why should I run away? After all, I haven't committed any crime. Is it really a sin for a rightful owner to retrieve an item that has been left in storage for a long time? Tremple just grunted, unable to refute this claim. Taking a few steps back, he gave a deep sigh and said, There are a mountain of things that I would like to ask you, but it would be an insult to Lady Sienna for me to dare to question the owner of Akasha in a place such as this. Tremple shook his head as he turned and left. He had come here in a hurry, thinking that he would do a favor for Eugene and entice him into joining the court wizards. Now Tremple couldn't help but feel that it had been a complete waste of time. How the hell was he supposed to settle a matter like this? How was he even supposed to report it? A hearing, he says. What a mess. But do we really have grounds to hold a hearing? All that happened is that an item has been returned to its owner. Although he thought this, Tremple didn't really believe it. Tremple let out another sigh. Akasha couldn't just be treated as a simple object. After the wise Sienna had gone into seclusion 200 years ago, her name had become one of Aratha's most important symbols. Countless wizards from all over the continent had come to Arath, fascinated by Sienna's legend, and many tourists flocked to Meridian Square, which was merely named after her and Sienna's mansion every day. Akasha was, in a sense, even more of a symbol of Sienna than even witchcraft itself. Tremple couldn't possibly imagine how Akasha would be permitted to leave Akron, let alone Arath. What in the world just happened? After Tremple had taken the elevator down, still heaving out sighs, Mare had quickly sat down next to Eugene and started questioning him. How could you have become Akasha's new master? Akasha should have been sealed so that no one apart from Lady Sienna could even use it. That's right, it was, Eugene said with a nod as he once again turned to his magic book. In the past, it had been full of sentences that were difficult for him to understand. However, now it didn't feel like that at all. Just by reading it, his head was immediately able to understand what the author meant. Hey Sir Eugene. Can't you please answer my question properly first? Mare demanded as she leaned her face over the book to meet Eugene's eyes. Did you manage to find Lady Sienna? You did, didn't you? Apart from Lady Sienna, no other wizard would have been able to break Akasha's seal. Lady Sienna, she's still alive, right? There's no need to be so hasty, Eugene chided. You're really asking me to not be hasty. How does that make any sense? Sir Eugene might be able to leave this place at any time, but I can't do that. Mare argued. Eugene let out a short noise of surprise, closed the book and stood up. You're just going to run away now that it's too bothersome and tiring to answer my questions? Mare accused with a screech. I can't even hold on to you. Once you've run away like this, who knows when you might return? I just realized that I forgot something. Forgot something? What would you forget? Mare stuck close to Eugene as she followed behind him. She wasn't just quietly following him either, instead swinging both hands like windmills as she pounded on Eugene's back. But her soft cotton ball-like fists didn't hurt him in the slightest. Sir Eugene, you're always like that. Acting as you please, causing everyone else to feel frustrated. The contents of the fairy tale are completely correct. You're a piece of trash, a son of a bitch. Mare cursed. Sorry, but the one being described like that in the fairy tale isn't Eugene Lionheart. It's the stupid Hamel, Eugene corrected her. Are you really saying something like that at this point? Mare asked in disbelief. I know that you are Hamel. Well, that may be, Eugene agreed. Are you making fun of me? You son of a bitch. I'm ordering you to tell me where Lady Sienna is and whether she's all right. Geez, I told you not to be so hasty. Why do you keep telling me to not be hasty? When I need to hurry up and get the answers from you before you leave. Just hold on for a bit longer, Eugene grumbled as he quickly turned around. Eugene grabbed her by the waist and lifted her up into the air. Kaya! Mare screeched as she kicked her heels in midair. Eugene shook Mare up and down, then placed her on top of a nearby desk. You bad guy. Mare's vocabulary was similar to Sienna's, but also different. Sienna was someone who had mastered all kinds of curses, from son of a bitch to much worse ones, but Mare's curses weren't as harsh as Sienna's. After all, Mare wasn't Sienna herself, but instead a familiar created based on Sienna's childhood. Just wait here for a moment. I have to concentrate, so don't disturb me, Eugene instructed with a grin as he patted Mare on the head. Then he walked over to Witchcraft. Mare watched Eugene, her expression filled with displeasure as she pouted her lips. There were a lot of things that she still wanted to ask him, one of them addressing the fact that she didn't know what Eugene was planning to do now. Holding Akasha in his left hand, Eugene reached out to Witchcraft with his right hand. As he did, Witchcraft began to activate. He had done this dozens, even hundreds of times now. Eugene closed his eyes and connected to Witchcraft. The first thing he saw was the eternal whole, the ultimate goal of the circle magic formula. It still amazed him even though he had already seen it hundreds of times. Eugene stared at the eternal whole for a few moments. It was an infinite cycle of circles. He had already managed to attain some understanding of it, and through this understanding he had been able to create the ring flame formula. Akasha was assisting his ability to understand magic. But even with that, his understanding of the eternal whole didn't undergo any great changes. He knew that it was an infinitely multiplying amount of circles that were chained together, and the mana amplified through this process could be considered numerically infinite. So there seemed to have been no point in trying to get a second look at it. This must mean that my understanding of it is correct, Eugene thought with some relief. Since this was the case, even with Akasha's assistance, his understanding of the eternal whole hadn't undergone any changes. Eugene grinned with satisfaction at this realization. But he hadn't connected to Witchcraft just to confirm this. Eugene had a different goal in mind. He took a few deep breaths and then opened his eyes. As he returned to reality, the eternal whole was no longer visible. Instead, a sphere could be seen that was covered in layers or rings. This was the physical appearance of Witchcraft. Without erasing his smile, Eugene approached Witchcraft. Back at the World Tree, in the Elven domain, Sienna had taught him the method used to unlock Akasha's seal. She had also taught him something else. While readying his focus, Eugene held Akasha forward. Akasha's dragon heart began to glow softly and Witchcraft began to respond to this light. Huh? Mare made a puzzled noise, an analytic expression crossing her face as she sat on the desk, only for her eyes to widen in surprise. The rings surrounding Witchcraft, which had never stopped moving, were coming to a halt one by one. With each ring that stopped moving, the light that surrounded Witchcraft's sphere dimmed. Creak creak. Once all the rings had completely stopped, the sphere split into two, revealing a huge mana crystal. This was where the core formulas of Witchcraft, which no one had ever been able to discover or analyze, were stored. Eugene waved Akasha at the crystal. Kaya! Mare, who had been staring blankly, suddenly screamed. She panicked and jumped off the desk. Then she immediately rushed over to Eugene. Or at least that's what she intended to do, but she wasn't able to go through with it. The moment that Mare leapt off the desk, she lost all strength in her legs. Mare limply plopped down on the spot. She tried to scream once more, but this time she couldn't even let out a cry. Mare could sense that her body structure was changing. She had been dissected by wizards several times before, but that hadn't been painful for her. No matter how this body of hers was dissected, the core of Mare was inside of Witchcraft. As long as that remained intact, Mare's body would never be permanently broken. It had been hundreds of years since Witchcraft was stored in Akron. Several wizards had attempted to crack into Witchcraft, but none had been able to open up the exterior of Witchcraft and reach the techniques inside. However, Eugene had just managed to open up the exterior of Witchcraft without any apparent difficulty. Mare stared at Eugene's back with terrified eyes. She wanted to say something to him, but she couldn't move her body according to her will. This caused Mare to feel even greater fear. She was dying. No, she was malfunctioning. Was she really going to be erased like this? Why? Was this something that Lady Sienna had requested? But why in the world would she do so? There shouldn't be any reason for doing that. A number of thoughts that Mare didn't even want to contemplate began appearing inside of Mare's head. Yuah. Mare started sobbing as thick streams of tears ran from her eyes. Yuah. Wah. Eugene remained silently focused on his task. Sob hic. Wah. As Mare continued to cry, she belatedly realized something. The sound of her crying was audible. Even though just a moment ago she hadn't been able to make any noise when she had tried to scream. Mare jerked her head up in surprise. "Why are you crying?" Eugene asked as he looked over at Mare with a confused expression. Her lips trembling, Mare sniffed, some snot drawn back up her nose. Knock knock. After watching Mare for a few moments waiting for her to say something, Eugene tried to cheer her up with a joke. Knock knock. Despite his repeated attempts, Mare remained silent. Knock. Shut up, Mare said with a slight sniffle as she got to her feet. What in the world? Just what in the world did you just do? How did you, to witchcraft? What did you do? I moved the formula controlling your structure from witchcraft over to me, Eugene revealed. Huh. Mare grunted in shock. Eugene continued, I thought it would be better to move it to Akasha, but Sienna said that it would be better to move it to me instead. She said that adding your control formula to Akasha would be incredibly difficult, while with all the mana that I have, I should have more than enough to sustain you. Mare couldn't find anything to say to this. Eugene just grinned and tucked Akasha into his cloak. Sienna asked me to tell you that she's sorry. Eugene began conveying the message. Hick. Mare broke her silence with a sob. Eugene kept talking. She also asked me to take good care of you. Since you've been stuck in this place for hundreds of years, she wanted me to take you out of here so you can see some better sights and even have some good food to eat. Mare kept crying. Sup. First of all, let's get you a change of clothes. Eugene hesitated. No, Ichem, we don't need to do that immediately, right? So let's go to the Red Tower first. I still have to explain the situation to my master. You are. Mare burst into tears once more as she threw herself into Eugene's arms. Chapter 119, 4. In the Red Tower of Magic, Lovelian was trying to understand the situation he was in, wondering how he should react to it, and struggling to decide how in the world he was meant to deal with this in the future. This problem had already caused him to sigh more than once. But if someone asked him whether he was angry, Lovelian felt like this really wasn't a problem he could be angry about. Though if that was the case, then was he supposed to be annoyed? It should still be okay to feel annoyed when being faced with such a difficult problem. For now, Lovelian hesitated. Yet he couldn't find it in himself to get annoyed. With a distressed expression, Lovelian looked at the person in the seat across from him. Eugene Lionheart. The very first disciple that the Red Tower Master Lovelian had ever taken. At the same time, he was also the adopted child of Lovelian's longtime friend, Gilead Lionheart. Being the son of a friend wasn't enough reason for Lovelian to ever treat Eugene with unconditional favoritism. The reason why Lovelian had made Eugene his disciple, aside from being the son of his friend, was that Lovelian was fascinated with Eugene's talent. This was why Lovelian was finding it so hard to get angry at Eugene. Please explain to me just how in the world things got like this, Lovelian pleaded as he looked down at the staff that had been placed on the table between them. This was Akasha, the wise Sienna's personal staff. Lovelian considered himself to be a grand disciple who had inherited the legacy of the wise Sienna, and held pride in this fact. It was a pride that had been instilled in him from a young age. Lovelian's master's master was Sienna's disciple. So ever since Lovelian had first started learning magic, he had been told every day by his master to treat his master's master's master, the wise Sienna, as his grandmaster and pay his respects to her. This is a strange feeling, Lovelian thought to himself as he looked down at Sienna's staff. Not only Lovelian himself, but even his master and his master's master had been unable to become the wielder of this staff. To think that my disciple would truly be able to receive Akasha's recognition, Lovelian marveled. When he thought of it like that, Lovelian just couldn't bring himself to get angry or annoyed at Eugene. He didn't even feel any jealousy. He just felt like Eugene was a truly unique individual and held pride in the fact that such a person was his disciple. While waiting for Eugene's reply, Lovelian took the teacup in front of him and brought it to his lips. Right. Was something like a reason for which Akasha would choose Eugene really all that important? What was truly important was that Lovelian's only disciple had already become Akasha's master. As a result, the royal family could even decide to hold a hearing where they would discuss whether or not to punish his disciple. If that really did happen, Lovelian would use everything that he had available to him, both from his position as the Red Tower Master and as an archwizard, in order to protect Eugene. The moment that Lovelian had made up his mind on this and was about to take a sip of his hot tea, A voice suddenly spoke up. Excuse me. Push. Lovelian spewed out his tea in surprise. Yet even at such a moment he proved himself worthy of the title of an arch-wizard. Before the tea that he had spat out could even touch Eugene, Lovelian evaporated the liquid using magic, then grabbed his sore throat as he went into a coughing fit. Are you okay? Eugene asked in concern. I'm all right, Lovelian replied as he waved off Eugene's concern. Then Lovelian's eyes widened in shock as he stared at Eugene. To be more precise, rather than at Eugene, Lovelian was staring at Mare, who had popped out of Eugene's cloak, so that only her face was showing. Why did you come out without permission? Eugene chided her. Mare complained, just how long do I have to keep hiding in here? After all, I haven't done anything wrong. Look at how surprised he is. Why did you burst out like that? Eugene scolded her. That's why I told you to wait until the conversation is over and then slowly make in. I don't feel like it makes much of a difference whether I shock him now or I shock him later. Even though you led me out of there while promising to give me freedom, you stuffed me inside your cloak as soon as we left Akron, Mare grumbled, her cheeks puffing up in indignation. Then she twisted her body back and forth inside the cloak, while trying her best to work her way out. However, no matter how much effort she put into it, it was impossible for Mare to fully leave the cloak on her own. Can't you just let me out of here for a bit? Mare begged. You may not know this, but it's very dark and lonely here. Well, it should be fine, Eugene muttered as he glanced up at Lovelian for approval. Lovelian was staring at Mare with his jaw half dropped. Ahem, Eugene coughed and opened up his cloak further. Mare crawled out of the opening on her own and while putting on an elegant act she greeted Lovelian. Hello Sir Lovelian. I believe that it has been a month since we last met. Lovelian stammered before finally nodding. Just what in the world are you doing outside of Akron? No, but how does this make any sense? Isn't Lady Mare the familiar in charge of witchcraft? Lady Sienna asked me to do this, Eugene explained. Lovelian's expression underwent another change at these words. He picked his jaw back up and then tried to calm himself. So it's true, you really have met Lady Sienna? Lovelian asked eagerly. Yes, Eugene simply replied. I've heard that you've been to the Samar rainforest, Eugene. You then returned to the Lionheart clan's main estate with over 100 elves following you. Lovelian hesitated. Those elves? Did they come from the elven territory that's said to lie at the foot of the World Tree? That's not the case, Eugene denied. I led back some elves who weren't able to return to the elven territory and were just living among themselves. I still can't believe it, Lovelian said as he lowered his teacup with a trembling hand. For you to have found the elven territory where Lady Sienna was rumored to have gone into seclusion. 200 years ago, when Lady Sienna went into seclusion, my master's master, who was Lady Sienna's own disciple, countless wizards of Aroth, and even the court wizards division went over to Samar hoping to track down Lady Sienna. However, let alone Sienna, they hadn't even found the elven territory. About that, it all has to do with when I went to Nahama. Eugene thus started his attempt at convincing Lovelian. He had already thought about what to say. In Nahama, Eugene claimed to have accidentally discovered Hamel's grave. The story up to here was the same as the one he had given at the Black Lion Castle. He went over the Death Knight's attack and his encounter with Amelia Merwin. Then Eugene described how he had found a leaf of the World Tree within Hamel's coffin. After heading over to Samar, he had been guided by the leaf. With its help he had managed to enter the elven territory, and met Sienna who had been placed under a seal. Eugene hesitated. Telling him that I'm Hamel would be a bit. It wasn't that Eugene didn't trust Lovelian. But even if Eugene did trust him, there was still something holding him back. Eugene had yet to even reveal to Gerhard and Gilead that he was the reincarnation of Hamel. Apart from the demon king of incarceration, only Mare knew that Eugene had once been Hamel. 1. There was a simple reason for this. Mare was a familiar created by Sienna. She would absolutely never betray this secret, because she was incapable of such a betrayal, so no one would be able to question Mare and make her tell them the truth. So Lady Sienna has been placed under a seal. Lovelian considered this problem as he chewed on his bottom lip. A huge hole had been pierced through her chest and only the power of the World Tree was barely keeping her alive. As a disciple who had inherited Sienna's legacy and who deeply admired her as an example to all wizards, Lovelian naturally felt an extreme amount of anger at this fact. While transferring the ownership of Akasha to me, Lady Sienna also asked me to look after Mare. Eugene finished his explanation. Lovelian listened silently. She also told me the method of how to undo her seal, Eugene revealed. If we can somehow kill Raizakia, who's trapped within a dimensional rift, the curse afflicting Lady Sienna will disappear. Eugene, Lovelian interrupted with a stiff expression. I think it would be better not to talk about this matter at the hearing. Yes, I also feel the same way, Eugene agreed. The wise Sienna had been fatally wounded. This fact alone was enough to make countless wizards go crazy. If this information were to be revealed, just how many wizards would go searching for Sienna in Samar, and would take out their hostility on Helmuth out of a desire for revenge? On top of that, the Black Tower Master Balzac Ludbeth would also be attending the hearing. Although Raizakia didn't have any sort of contract with the Demon King of Incarceration, that still didn't mean that they could be sure the Demon King of Incarceration had nothing to do with Sienna's sealing. 200 years have passed. Neither the Demon King of Incarceration, nor the demon folk contracted to him have gone looking for Sienna, Eugene considered. However, if it was revealed to them that Sienna had been mortally wounded and placed under a seal, this might drive them to a different course of action. I don't trust Balzac Ludbeth, Lovelian continued speaking. However, aside from my distrust of him, Balzac Ludbeth has indeed behaved with more decency and common sense than the true demon folk and the other black wizards like him that are found in Helmuth. As such, while I might distrust Balzac Ludbeth, I do not hate him. Eugene hesitated, unsure what to say. Well, I'm sure that you also cannot deny this fact, Lovelian stated. Eugene clicked his tongue. In the present, there were only 3 black wizards who had personally signed a contract with the Demon King of Incarceration. Although Eugene had never met Earl Edmund Codrith, who resided in Helmuth, so he couldn't say for sure, it was true that, when compared to the likes of Amelia Merwin, Balzac showed an incomparable amount of decency and common sense. Even if Balzac doesn't leak this information, if you were to reveal Lady Sienna's condition during the hearing, Eugene, the story is sure to eventually be spread far and wide, Lovelian stated with certainty. Eugene, there are a large number of demons in Helmuth who are interested in gaining prestige. Right now, Helmuth's 3 princes might be the closest to the position of the next Demon King, but there are countless demon folk below them who also covet their prestigious titles and the position of the next Demon King. One such demon folk was the Rakshasa Princess Iris, but apart from her there were many others. The honor of taking the wise Sienna's life was sure to be coveted by these prestige-seeking demon folk. I'll be sure not to spill any information about Lady Sienna being sealed away during the hearing, Eugene promised. I was thinking of saying something along the lines of, she just went into seclusion out of a desire for some serenity and introspection. Yes, Lovelian agreed. I too think that would be for the best. As for the transfer of Akasha and Lady Mare, if the other party is you, Eugene, then I'm sure that everyone at the hearing will have no choice but to accept it. Eugene was a descendant of the great Vermouth Lionheart. At the same time, he was also a distant disciple who had inherited the legacy of the wise Sienna. There weren't many people on the continent who could claim to be of Sienna's lineage and possess as many ties to her as Eugene did. Though the Green Tower Master is sure to have a seizure, Lovelian thought as an aside. Generic Osman was the Tower Master of the Green Tower of Magic, in which Sienna had once presided, and his master's master was also once Sienna's disciple. Eugene hesitantly brought up another issue. But Master Lovelian, I'm a bit worried that I'll be forced to swear an oath to tell the truth during the hearing. Wizards were not able to deceive an oath sworn on their own mana. If they swore to tell the truth, but instead told a lie, their mana would no longer act according to the will of the wizard who had told the lie. There's no way that will happen, Lovelian said with a smirk. Eugene, an oath sworn on one's mana is so absolute that its use cannot be forced so arbitrarily. Even criminals have the right to remain silent. So how could they justify forcing you when you haven't even committed any crime to swear such an oath? Well, with this matter being what it is, Eugene trailed off hesitantly. I agree that issues concerning Lady Sienna cannot be discussed lightly, but Eugene, you haven't committed any crimes and Lady Sienna also hasn't requested for the truth to be revealed, now has she? As Lovelian said these words, he gently grabbed Eugene's hands. If those attending the hearing do attempt to persecute you and force you to swear such an oath, As Lady Sienna's disciple, your master, and a friend of the Lionheart clan, I will be sure to protect you. Of course, feel free to use all of the qualifications available to you in order to protect yourself. No matter how powerful Aratha's royal family is, they cannot recklessly persecute the descendant of Kiel's great hero, a member of the Lionheart clan. This was indeed the case. If they really did have the guts to persecute Eugene, then Tremple would have taken Eugene in for questioning immediately, instead of leaving him in Akron. The fact that he hadn't meant that Tremple was also one of those wizards who truly revered Sienna. Also, it was because the Lionhearts weren't a clan that could be so recklessly messed with. Furthermore, in regards to the Black Dragon Rhyzakia, I will use my own personal connections and my information network in order to acquire any clues to his whereabouts, Lovelian promised. Please also look into any information about Barong, Eugene added in a cold tone of voice. He had given it a lot of thought, but it was clear that the information that Lovelian could collect would be qualitatively superior to any information that Eugene would be able to collect by running around on his own 2 feet. Yes, of course I will. After all, there's no good reason why your location should have been exposed. After saying this, Lovelian was lost in thought for a few moments. While listening to this conversation between the two of them, Mare ever so slowly stretched her fingers across the table between their seats. Refreshments such as cookies, chocolates, and candies had been placed in the center of the table. For Mare, these were the very first sweets that she had encountered after hundreds of years. Would it be okay if she ate them? They were laid out like that because they were meant to be eaten, right? Although she hadn't been offered any tea, it should still be fine for her to try the snacks, right? What are you acting so secretive for? Eugene said with a grin as he pulled over the basket of snacks and placed it in front of Mare. Even Lovelian, who was still lost in thought, used a spell to push a teacup over to Mare. Wow, it's been 200 years since my last cup of tea. I really like tea leaves from the Euchre region, Mare said as she brought the teacup to her lips. The tea was hot. This warmth brought a bright smile to Mare's face. While blowing on the black tea to cool it down, she took a sip of the tea and then closed her eyes as her body shook in pleasure. Although Mare preferred sweet milk tea over black as the first tea that she had drunk in over 200 years, it would have tasted sweet even if it was the most bitter concoction in history. You didn't necessarily need to tell me the truth, Eugene, Lovelian said, breaking silence after he was done sorting out his thoughts. However, you have revealed it to me. Is it because I am your master? That was part of it, but it was also because I know that Master Lovelian is a good person, Eugene replied with a grin. Also, the truth is that I haven't revealed everything. There are some things that I definitely cannot tell anyone. Of course that would be the case. However, I won't try and squirrel them out of you, Eugene. Even if you don't tell me what they are, the fact that you've mentioned you're keeping secrets in the end means that you're asking me to forgive you for keeping them from me, right? Lovelian asked with a grin. As such, I will happily wait until the day you feel it's safe to share your secrets with me. Well, I might be able to tell you someday soon, Eugene answered his trust with an awkward smile. Glancing away to hide his embarrassment, Eugene noticed Mare eating a flat cookie that was covered in chocolate. The way that she closed her eyes and clenched her fists with each bite reminded him of Sienna. Though Sienna favored alcohol, she also liked sweet desserts just as much. Would it be all right for me to try and feed Mare a whiskey bonbon? Eugene thought with idle curiosity. Whiskey bonbons, chocolates filled with liquor, were a treat that Sienna loved to death. From Mare's outer appearance, she appeared to be about 10 years old. However, she had been in existence for hundreds of years, and wouldn't it be strange to treat a familiar like a human at the same age? Would you like to join us for dinner? Eugene eventually offered. No, the two of you should go and have fun by yourselves, Lovelian declined with a smile. At the word dinner, Mare's eyes shone brightly. Stealthily wiping away the chocolate off of her lips with a finger, Mare turned to look at Eugene. I want to eat cake, Mare requested. Eugene argued, but cakes aren't really food, are they? What kind of a statement is that? If you eat it and it fills you up, then of course it's food, Mare insisted. If that's the case, then that's even more reason why you shouldn't consider a meal. Since there's nothing that can actually fill you up, Eugene pointed out. Mare pouted at these words. As a familiar, while she had the same appearance as a human being, this didn't mean that the inside of her body was the same as a human. The food that she ate was completely decomposed by her own mana and disintegrated. In other words, this meant that no matter how much she ate, she could never be full. If it tastes good then it's food, Mare stubbornly insisted, unwilling to give in. Eugene stood up along with Mare and bowed his head towards Lovelian. Once they had left the tower, Mare asked, "Aren't you going to tell the Red Tower Master about your past life, Sir Eugene?" "Not yet." "Then, does that mean that the only ones who know that Sir Eugene is Hamel are Lady Sienna and I?" Mare asked excitedly. Eugene corrected her. "The Demon King of Incarceration probably knows as well. The Demon King is different. So it's true that the only ones you treated as special and personally revealed the truth to are Lady Sienna and me, right?" Mare insisted with a bright grin as she stuck closely to Eugene's side. "Thinking about it like that makes me feel a little happy. Even if you act all cutesy, we're not going to eat cake," Eugene warned her. "You're a piece of trash," Mare cursed disappointedly. Eugene changed the subject. "Anyways, do you know how to drink alcohol?" When it came to alcohol, Sienna would always go crazy. "Go crazy?" Mare repeated. "Could you please stop insulting Lady Sienna?" Lady Sienna would elegantly savor her wine, she would never go crazy for it. "How hilarious, do you really think that you know Sienna better than I do?" Eugene challenged Mare. "Ugh. That might not be the case, but I too know a lot about Lady Sienna," Mare defended herself. Eugene returned to his main point. "That's why I was asking you, do you know how to drink?" Mare hesitantly admitted. "While Lady Sienna was drinking, I once asked her for a cup. But Lady Sienna refused, saying that I was too young to drink." "If so, then I shouldn't give you any," Eugene concluded. "Why shouldn't you give me some?" "At that time it was just because it hadn't been long since I was created. Now, after 200 years have passed, I'm much older than Sir Eugene. I should be able to drink as well," Mare claimed proudly. Eugene wasn't swayed. "That still won't do. After all, your mother said that you shouldn't drink any." "My mother?" Mare's eyes shook as she repeated this word. "Please don't say such a thing in front of anyone else. It might create some strange misunderstandings about Lady Sienna." "It's the truth, so why shouldn't I?" Eugene said with a shrug. "Since Sienna was the one who made you, then Sienna is your mother." "However, I'm a familiar, not a human," Mare pointed out. "Who in the world would treat a familiar as their own child? We familiars also don't consider our creators to be our parents. To put it bluntly, familiars just see their creators as their owners. Why would you being a human or a familiar make any difference? In the first place, you're different from the regular familiars, aren't you?" Eugene questioned. Mare hesitated. That's true. However, rather than her child as Lady Siena's familiar, it would be closer to call me her clone. Because I was made based on a childhood version of herself." "So what, do you really dislike being treated as Sienna's daughter that much?" Eugene asked with a grin. At these words, Mare's eyes began to dart here and there. Eventually she said, "My own desires don't matter. What's important is what Lady Sienna thinks of me. And probably Lady Sienna doesn't think of me as her daughter." "Then we can just ask her later," Eugene said with a smile as he righted her hat, which had tilted to the side. "Sienna was worried about you. She also felt sorry for abandoning you. That's why she asked me to take care of you. At the very least, the Sienna Meridian that I know isn't the type of person who would think of you as a mere familiar. If you really were just a simple familiar, she wouldn't have made you in her own image. Sienna's deepest desire was to live an ordinary life, get married like everyone else, have children, live happily, and eventually become a grandmother. However, Sienna hadn't even found a single romantic partner in Aroth, let alone getting married. She didn't have any children either. Instead, she had created a familiar that closely resembled her in her own childhood. I'm sure that Sienna will accept you as her daughter, Eugene promised Mare. Mare wasn't able to say anything, her lips pouting silently. With both hands she pulled her hat low to cover the expression on her face. Even so, she wasn't able to cover the sniffling sounds. Are you crying again? Sob. I'll let you eat some cake, so don't cry, Eugene weakly conceded with a sigh. Though we won't go there right away. I want to get a meal first, then we can get you some cake. Sir Eugene, you really like Lady Sienna, don't you? Mare accused. Eugene was taken aback. Has this girl gone crazy? Why spout such bullshit all of a sudden? You definitely like her, Mare stated confidently. It's love, isn't it? I already found out about it. In the fairy tale, Hamel admitted that he loved Sienna. I fucking said that was a lie, didn't I? Do you really think I'm crazy enough to say that I'm fond of that tomboy? Yurg. Eugene gagged and then covered his mouth with a disgusted expression on his face. At his violent reaction, Mare just proudly raised her chin high. The younger a man is, the less honest he is with the girl he likes, and instead he bullies her, Mare lectured. So what about it? I'm not a young man, Eugene argued. That saying refers to the age of the mind rather than the age of the body. That's even more reason why I'm not young anymore. Don't you know how old I was in my previous life? Changing the subject, Mare revealed. Whenever she spoke of Hamel, Lady Sienna seemed happy. Embarrassed, Eugene tried to hurry along. Stop with the nonsense and let's get going. If Lady Sienna gets engaged to Sir Eugene, does that mean I should call Sir Eugene father instead? Mare asked teasingly. Don't say something like that, I really will vomit. Eugene threatened her with a frown as he hastened his steps. 1. Sigurd also know that Eugene had once been Hamel, but we kept it as it was written in the Ross.